Mr. President, first of all, thank you so much for talking to i24 News. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and I want to congratulate i24 for going from strength to strength, especially in these very challenging days.
Thank you so much. If I could begin the interview by asking you about your own personal experiences of that dark day, October 7th, what you saw, what are the memories that will stay with you?
Well, it started with a huge siren, and when there's a siren, I automatically know it's war, because I live during weekends in the same home I grew up in. And when I grew up in it in 1967, we dug trenches. We didn't have mamad, we didn't have a shelter then. We dug trenches, all us, on the entire family, assuming that there will be war a few days before the war started. And during the war itself, we were in a trench listening to the bombing and shelling on our homes, then in northern Tel Aviv. So automatically I took my wife to the shelter, but it was kind of mind-boggling. It's Simchat Torah, it's beautiful weekend after a beautiful holiday of Sukkot. And I immediately understood that it's something else. It doesn't make sense. So I opened up TV. I was planning to go to synagogue, but from that moment on, life changed immediately. Because I kept on asking, why can't I hear Ophir Liebstein, the head of the regional council of Sha'ar HaNegev? Usually when there are missiles from Gaza, rockets, he immediately goes on the radio and explains what's going on. And I kept on telling Michal, where's Ophir? He's a good friend of mine. Why doesn't he answer? Why is there no interview with him? And an hour or two later, it was immediately announced that he was killed in battle. But we were totally uninformed about what's going on. And only through the media channels and reporting, we understood that it's hell has wreaked upon us, and we are going through this cup of agony and pain ever since.
Despite that, I mean, I've spoken a lot over the past month to survivors, people whose families have been taken hostage, people who have witnessed things no human being should ever witness.
Absolutely.
Despite that, there is still this kind of October 7th denialism, people, doubting what happened, people saying perhaps the Israelis are exaggerating. Do you think, for that reason, that the body cam footage that the terrorists themselves recorded, those films that were shown to accredited journalists, should that be shown to the wider world, or do you think there's no point, some people will never really believe what happened?
Some people will never really believe it, because if they hate us, they hate us. And if they're prejudiced, they're prejudiced. I still recall from my father's biography, he wrote in his autobiography his description about the liberation of the concentration camps. He was one of the first soldiers, officers to enter Bergen-Belsen in Germany as a British officer. And he tells the story how he went to various camps and, of course, took many German officers and generals as prisoners of war. And there was one high-ranking officer who said, I don't believe for a moment what you're talking about that happened in the nearby camp. Although there was smell and everything was clear to all the neighbors. So my father took him there. He told him, if you show me that, and it's true, I will take off my sword, I will take off all my ranks, and I will break it. As like a German officer of dignity admitting, and that's exactly what happened. And my father took him and he vomited and he cursed and he admitted, and so forth and so on. The same I wish I could do to all our enemies who say, of course, it's terrible, or those who support them, or those who are accomplice with them, or those who say, okay, but. No, there's no but. The world cannot accept this type of brutality, atrocities, sadism, non-acceptable by any norms. It has nothing to do, truly nothing to do with the conflict, with the borders, with the Palestinians, with settlements or anything. It simply has to do with hate and with a whole civilization of hate that wants to wipe all of us off the map, that wants to reign in the Middle East and the rest of the world. It's a jihadist school of thought that the world cannot accept. And it's not a war only between Israel and Hamas. It's a war between two major concepts of life, a civilization that wants to run the world in with certain rules of the family of nations, or a civilization that wants to wipe everybody's head, chop their heads, and reign the world according to fundamentalist rules.
Well, quite. Despite this, the Hamas leaders themselves keep going on TV and radio and making comments. Just yesterday, one of them spoke to the New York Times. He said, "We want perpetual war. We wanted this. We wanted a violent response from Israel because we don't want anyone in the region to have peace." Yet there are still people who maintain that they are freedom fighters, they are representing the Palestinian people and their legitimate grievances. What do you say to those people?
They're hypocrites. They're hypocrites, or naive, or simple anti-Semites, or all of the above together. At the end, the truth is the truth. One needs to admit the truth. The truth is the truth. Women and young girls were raped and butchered and brutally molested, and babies were killed and burnt, and I can go on and on and on. This is unbelievable. Since the Holocaust, we haven't seen such an number of Jews being killed in one day, but killed brutally and tortured. And when you speak to those in the rabbis in the morgues who identify the bodies, they tell you they've never seen such wounds in their life inflicted on bodies and on human beings. So first and foremost, people have to admit to the atrocity. That's it. Then you have to discuss about all other issues as well, which we are in taking care of. Of course, uprooting Hamas and aiding the civilian population in Gaza, whilst working tirelessly to bring the hostages back home.
Well, it is, of course, the job of the media to report the truth. And I wanted to ask you about the international media. Do you think that there is an anti-Israel bias? Taking, for example, the BBC, who refused to refer to Hamas as terrorists. You yourself gave an interview to the BBC. They took out a portion of your answer.
I gave a 28-minute interview to the BBC, to a very distinguished interviewer who came especially to meet me, and she actually knows me for many years, and they left only 6 minutes, chopping it, by the way, and editing it in a very negligent way. It's not my job to go and start quarreling with them, but I must say I'm quite dismayed, and I would have hoped differently. But it's not only the BBC. There's a kind of this school of thought in certain quarters of the Western world that does not understand that this is a war on their life, on their ability to enjoy decent, liberal, modern, progressive, democratic life, or any other ability to live well, even if it's not a democratic country. Nonetheless, at the end, most of the rank and file of the international leadership understands this, and they are taking a firm position supporting Israel. And I'm seeing expressions of support day in, day out by leaders, predominantly, of course, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the entire US administration and both sides of the aisle in Congress, but also definitely, as you know, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and many, many other important nations. So the world understands. The world we live in, with digital impacts of brainwashing like TikTok and other things, does not explain to the average person the complexity of this situation and the clear need for moral clarity.
Well, you have been speaking to world leaders like Vice President Harris. Do you feel, though, that the window of legitimacy, as it's termed, for Israel is running out, and there is increased pressure for a ceasefire or tactical pauses, as President Biden has called them? We had, of course, that statement from the G7 yesterday. Do you feel that pressure that Israel is losing?
Yeah, but the G7 starts immediately. The first demand is the release of the hostages. Mm-hmm. And everybody agrees the hostages must be released. It is unacceptable by any norms that kids, 10-month-old baby to a 85-year-old Holocaust survivor should be there at all. So I would like to reiterate what Prime Minister Netanyahu said just 2 days ago. There will not be any ceasefire without release of hostages. And the whole discussion about humanitarian pauses, I must tell you, I haven't seen, or I'm unaware of any response from the Hamas side to any of these ideas. I see a lot of news, a lot of spins, a lot of background noises that come from third parties. Nothing is put on the table. We are progressing dramatically within the Gaza territory to uproot Hamas infrastructure, and our military is doing an incredible job. It's very complicated, challenging, dangerous, but they're doing an outstanding job to uproot the ability of Hamas to have military capabilities and to uproot their infrastructure so that they won't be able to rule Gaza.
Well, that's Israel's military objective, isn't it, to destroy Hamas completely. The Americans were criticised for going into Iraq and Afghanistan without a plan for what those countries would look like afterwards. Does Israel have a plan, or at least a vision, for what Gaza should look like?
So a lot of that is being discussed, of course, by the government. The President of Israel doesn't deal with it on a daily basis. There are many ideas. It is an opportunity the day after to enable the Palestinians in Gaza to live in peace and prosper. But let me tell you, when we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, we came to our people and said the pullout will enable Gaza to become the Hong Kong of the Middle East, or one of those, beautiful sites that can evolve economically, successfully. Nothing of that has happened. We pulled to the last iota, and we only got terror. We got thousands and thousands of missiles. It became an Iranian platform by coup d'etat in 2007, and this Iranian platform must be eradicated as a platform.
One vision involves the moderate Gulf countries, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, countries that you have visited, and you did appear to really have warm, friendly ties with the leaders
still do.
Of those countries. Have you spoken to those leaders at all since?
I'm in contact with many leaders in the region all the time. We all understand the geostrategic situation. You mentioned it yourself. You quoted the Hamas spokesperson saying we wanted an ongoing war. Basically, he said, in order to prevent the inclusion of Israel in the region. So we have here two coalitions. One, a coalition of very serious nations and strong nations who want to move forward in peace, in regional security, including the inclusion of Israel in the region. And the other, doing whatever it can to undermine the normalization process. So it is clear that the war is not only Israel-Hamas, it's also a war against the empire of evil, which is headed by Iran from Tehran, to undermine the inclusion of Israel in the region.
You were also recently in Turkey. Are you shocked by President Erdogan's violently anti-Israel rhetoric?
I was very sorry to hear that, and I expressed my regret and my frustration and anger about it. But the real issue goes way beyond it. It's the question, as we spoke from the beginning, do we accept such norms in the family of nations? Israel was not wishing to go to war. We are not warmongers. We are peace lovers. We were forced. This war was forced upon us. When I met President Erdogan 2 years ago, I made it clear to him that Hamas is a terror organization just like he feels as towards his enemies. And therefore, when we are bombed in our homes, we must take actions to uproot them and kill them and get them out of the way, get the mob out of the city. And that's exactly what we're doing.
There's been some really upsetting scenes from university campuses in the United States, Jewish students having to barricade themselves in rooms. I've seen recently people being beaten by Palestinians.
Ongoing all over the place.
It seems to be getting worse. You wrote a letter to the head of some of the leading universities.
What do you mean? Not to all the leaders. I wrote a letter to all presidents of all universities in the United States. And I got letters, some back, not yet. But the call is very clear. These presidents must intervene. It cannot be that there will be Hamas supporters on campus. Hamas supporters means supporters of people who support and carry out crimes against humanity and genocide. That's what they carried out. They took entire communities and burnt them and chopped them and tortured them and raped them and abducted them. It cannot be in a U.S. campus or any campus that advocates civil liberties and human rights that this will be allowed on campus.
But why do you think the progressive cause has been so hijacked by the...
Well, I think the progressive cause must look at itself in the mirror. And they don't want, some of them don't really want to look in the mirror. But a lot of the cultures that evolved in recent years has become cultures that are indifferent and ignorant to the real truth of life between good and evil. And they distort what evil is and they distort what good is. I can go on and on about it. We don't have much time, but many people have written about it. And there is a very fascinating publication called Sapir. Sapir is a publication of thoughtful people from Jews and non-Jews who discuss issues that are challenging the Jewish world. And it came out under the auspices of Maimonides Foundation. And one of the publications, one of the editions, had to do with the cancel culture in US campuses. There's a whole culture of cancel, meaning you can be the best person in the world, the biggest civil liberties advocate, but if, God forbid, you support the state of Israel, you're canceled. This cannot go on anymore. Cannot go on anymore. It starts with Israel, but will end with the West. They just don't get it. If Israel wasn't there, Europe would be next by these animals that we've seen on October 7th. And
of course, Europe has been repeatedly attacked by jihadists.
All the time.
Amid this spike in anti-Semitism, then in Europe and the United States, is Israel preparing, or should it prepare for a mass wave of aliyah, of immigration to Israel?
It always happens, always happens. And by the way, I met some very distinguished Jewish leaders and media people who came here and said we feel much safer here than anywhere else in the world. And I assume that will be one of the phenomena or the outcome of the war.
And finally, Israelis right now are living through, I think, the worst, the most traumatic period in an already very turbulent history. How can the nation heal? How can Israel get through this?
Look, the cup of agony and pain is filled, and we are seeing real torment, sadness, agony, tears, and emotions. But I told the nation last week, it's extremely natural to express emotions, to express fear, to cry. We have to go through this period of mourning, and but we are a very resilient nation. We came out of the worst atrocities in the past, the worst atrocity that humanity has known, the Holocaust. We built a very strong nation. We are an immense, incredible people. The people here are just amazing. I fall in love with them every minute as I go out with Michal to all sorts of places to see the people. I'll give you an example of what we went through yesterday. 3 sites that gave us, again, the same perception, the same proportion, the same understanding what an immense nation it is and so much light it has. We started with United Hatzalah in their headquarters down south. And the people who surrounded us was a Muslim doctor who was abducted by Hamas and liberated by the Israeli police, who was a volunteer of Hatzalah, Ethiopian immigrants, Haredi Jews, secular Jews, veterans, Israelis and newcomer Israelis, all together doing great work in helping and aiding people. Then we went to the Home Front Command. We saw hundreds of people working to assist the families of the hostages and coordinating all the efforts on being on alerts and sirens and what's not and resilience, and of course dealing with the needs of all the evacuees, about 230,000. And then we went to Tel Aviv Medical Center, to Ichilov, to the new war rehabilitation hospital. And you go in with these amazing doctors and nurses and of course these amazing soldiers and their families. Nobody will break us, nobody. We are a very strong nation. We shall overcome and we shall prevail and we shall win.
I think that's a very positive note to end on.
Thank you very much.
President Herzog, thank you so much.
Thank you.